Welcome to a slow, beginner-friendly lesson on writing tests with pytest in Python, made for absolute beginners. Hands-on begins. Last lesson we agreed testing matters. Today we write our first real tests using pytest, the most popular test runner in the Python world. We install it, learn the test _ convention, write a few test functions, run them with run pytest, and read what happens when one fails. By the end you will have written your first passing test and your first failing one. First real tests. Here is the project we will build. Source code lives in math_ops.py/src. Tests live in test_math_ops.py/tests. Notice the naming pattern. The test file mirrors the source file, with test_ prepended. That is not a rule pytest enforces, but it is a strong convention. When you see math_ops.py, you immediately know where its tests live. Mirror the source. Set up the project with init, change in, and add pytest to the dev group with add --dev pytest. Two things happen. Installs pytest into .venv, and it records the dependency under dependency-groups, dev, in pyproject.toml. Pytest is now part of your project. Anyone who clones the repo and runs sync gets pytest automatically, with no extra steps. Dev group, automatic. Once tests exist, you run them constantly. run pytest with no arguments runs every test it can find. Pass a file name to run just that file, useful when you are focused on one area. -x tells pytest to stop at the first failure, so you fix one thing at a time instead of drowning in a wall of red. Run pytest dozens of times a day. It is fast, it is cheap, and it is the entire workflow. The all-day command. Pytest turns the question "does this work?" into a single command you can run 100 times a day. A question, automated. Where does pytest live? In the dev dependency group, inside your projects.venv. add --dev pytest puts it there. It does not touch your system Python. It does not touch other projects. When a teammate clones your repo and runs sync, pytest appears in their venv automatically, same version, pinned by the lock file. There is no install pytest step in the readme. The lock file is the readme. Lock file is the readme. Here is what pyproject.toml looks like after you add pytest. Notice the dependency-groups section. The dev group contains pytest greater than or equal to version 8. This is separate from the project dependencies array, which holds runtime libraries your app needs to actually run. Pytest is a development tool, it never ships to your end users, so it stays in dev. knows the difference and respects it. Dev, not runtime. Pytest has a discovery convention. Test files must start with test_. Test functions must start with test_. Test classes, if you use them, must start with capital test. Anything that does not match this pattern is ignored. That is how pytest knows what to run without you telling it. Follow the convention and pytest finds everything. Break it and your tests silently do not run, which is worse than failing. Names matter. Here is your first real test file. We import add from math_ops. Then we write two test functions. Test_add positive numbers checks that 2 plus 3 equals 5, and test_add 0 checks that 0 plus 0 equals 0. Both functions start with test_, both call the function we want to check, and both use assert to compare the actual result to what we expect. That is the entire shape of a test. Two functions, two checks. Every failing test is a gift, a bug caught now, not by a customer later. Failure is a gift. Assert is the heart of every test. It is a built-in Python keyword. If the expression after assert evaluates to true, nothing happens, the test moves on. If it evaluates to false, Python raises an assertion error. Without pytest, that error would crash your program. With pytest, the runner catches the error, marks the test as failed, and moves on to the next one. Assert is how you say, this must be true, or something is wrong. The heart of every test. Assert is flexible. You can check equality with double equals, inequality with exclamation equals, membership with the in keyword, type with this instance, or just truthiness with is true. Any expression that evaluates to a Boolean works. The pattern is always the same: do something, then assert something about the result. If the assertion holds, the test passes. If it does not, the test fails and pytest tells you why. Many ways to check. Running pytest is one command, but the flags matter. run pytest with no arguments runs every test in the project. Pass a file name to focus on one file. -v switches on verbose output, which prints each test name and a pass or fail marker. -x stops at the first failure, so you can fix one thing at a time. The day-to-day loop is, write a test, save, run pytest-v, read the output, repeat. Flags matter. Here is what success looks like. PyTest collected 2 items, meaning it found 2 test functions. It ran both, and both passed. The verbose output shows each test by its full path, file name, : function name. At the bottom, 2 passed in 0.03 seconds. 2 checks, done in less time than it takes to blink. Run this 100 times a day and it still costs you nothing. 2 passed. Green means you can move forward. That is the whole feeling of professional development. Green means go. Here is the rhythm of working with tests. You write a small piece of code. You write a test that proves it works. You run run pytest. If green, you move on. If red, you read the failure, fix the code, and run again. The whole loop takes seconds. You do not write 10 features and then 10 tests, you alternate, feature then test, feature then test. This rhythm is called test-driven development when you write the test first, but even testing after is fine. What matters is the loop. Seconds per loop. Here is what failure looks like, and it is beautiful. PyTest shows you the exact line that failed, the line with the angle bracket marker. It shows what you expected, 5, and what the function actually returned, 6. It even shows the inputs, add of 2 and 3. At the bottom, the file name and line number. You do not need a debugger for most failures. PyTest hands you everything in a few lines. Read it, fix the bug, run again. Beautiful failure. Learning to read failures is a skill, and it is mostly about knowing where to look. Find the line marked with the angle bracket, that is the assertion that failed. Read the line above it for context. Compare what the test expected against what actually happened, both printed by PyTest. Then look at the bottom for the file and line number. For most bugs, that is enough. You go straight to the bug and fix it. No print statements, no debugger, no detective work. Where to look? Here is a fuller test file, 4 tests for the same function. Notice how each test checks one specific behavior, positive numbers, negative numbers, mixed signs, and 0. Each function has a clear name that describes what it is checking. When one fails, the name tells you immediately what broke. 4 short tests are far better than 1 big test, because a single failure tells you exactly which behavior regressed. Small and focused. Naming matters more than beginners think. Test files should mirror source files, source math_ops.py, test_math_ops.py. Test functions should describe the behavior they check, test_add positive numbers, not test1. When a test fails, the first thing you read is the name, so make the name a sentence that describes the broken behavior. Future you will thank present you. Read like a sentence. PyTest also supports classes. If you have many tests for one function, you can group them in a class that starts with capital test. Inside, each method starts with test_ and takes self as the first argument. The class itself is just an organizer. PyTest runs each method independently. You do not have to use classes. Many projects never do. But for dense areas with lots of related tests, a class can keep things tidy. Optional organizer. Quick self-check. Can you install PyTest with the right UV command? Can you name the 2 naming conventions PyTest uses to discover tests? Can you explain what assert does when the comparison is false? Can you run every test in a project with one command? If any feels shaky, rewind the matching section. You should leave this lesson able to write a test, run it, and read either a pass or a fail without confusion. Say each out loud. Here is the lesson in one breath. PyTest is the standard test runner in modern Python, and it lives in your project's dev group. Tests live in files named test_something.py, as functions named test_something. Assert is the only check you need. It compares actual to expected and fails loud when they differ. Run pytest constantly, and learn to read failures. They tell you almost everything you need. One breath. Next we go further into PyTest. We learn about fixtures, a clean way to share setup code across many tests. We meet confdist.py, the file where project-wide fixtures live. And we learn about mocking, how to fake an external call, like a request to an API, so your tests run fast and never touch the network. These 3 tools take you from beginner to comfortable with real-world testing. Fixtures next. Thanks for writing your first tests with PyTest. Next we meet fixtures and mocking. First tests, done.